Good morning. This presentation examines how the London Zoo contributed to the transnational circulation of zoological culture, focusing on its reception in Spain between the mid-19th and mid-20th centuries. All the images included here were published in Spain. It is necessary to introduce the Casa de Fieras Madrid Historic Zoo. Opened in 1774, it is Europe's second oldest zoological collection after Scotland. Its origins go back to the royal aviaries and lion houses of the 16th century. Although it lacked a scientific society, naturalists from the royal cabinet occasionally studied its specimens. And the kings also experimented with species acclimatization. After 1868 revolution, it became a public institution profoundly influencing Spanish popular culture until its closure in 1972. When I was working on the history of Madrid Casa de Fieras, I expected to find mostly reference to the Madrid Zoo itself in the Spanish sources. Instead, I was struck by the large numbers of news stories and visual sources mentioning all these zoological institutions. Reference to this source varied over time depending on which institution was involved. In the mid-19th century, the Paris Jardin des Plantes was the dominant reference in Spain. However, it gradually lost its fame, and by the early 20th century, sources spoke clearly of its decline and anachronistic status. During the interwar period, German zoos became the dominant reference in Spain. Hagenbeck was very famous due to its success breeding and selling animals and its cageless designs. Munich Hellebrunn Zoo and later the Berlin Zoo became ideal models. Around this time, American zoos also began to gain fame in Spanish sources. Most notably USA zoos like Brooklyn or San Diego, and South American ones like Buenos Aires. Despite changing trends, the London Zoo remained the most important influence in Spanish sources. For over a century, it was constant benchmark of quality. Its peak in popularity occurred between 1870 and 1930, overlapping with the popularity of other zoos. This raised the question of how the London Zoo became such a dominant cultural reference. These accounts were disseminated through three main sources: travel guides and costume-based literature, natural history books combining translated European observation with local field data, and the massive volume found in the popular press, such as general and illustrated newspapers, specialized journals, and children's magazines. It is well known that the Society Annual Report and Proceedings acted de facto as news agency for British press. The information reached Spain translated for British journal or through French media, and from Spain it reached to colonies like Cuba or Philippines. Although these magazines were mainly consumed by the bourgeoisie, studies of the illustrated press indicate that thanks to collective oral reading practice and press images, their reach could be much wider. By zoological garden culture, I mean the knowledge representations and emotional attitudes toward animals producing within the zoos. This culture circulated between different countries. It included strictly scientific information, but also popular anecdotes, humor, moral stories, and early discussions about animal welfare. This was the main source of knowledge about exotic animals in popular culture. Let's examine the content through the case of the London Zoo. Most majority of news stories about the London Zoo in Spain were short notice regarding the acquisition of specimens. They highlighted the arrival of rare unprecedented animals in Europe. Reports usually included brief explanations about their curious appearance, their difficult to maintain, and their specific care. Most majority of news stories about the London Zoo. Also reported on the capture and transfer of these animals, often presenting them as stories of adventure. These narratives reinforced the zoo status as an exclusive collection representing the vast British Empire. The press also reported incidents including thefts of animals, attacks involving keepers or other animals, and climatic events such as the hurricane of 1846 and the flood of 1935. However, some of the most interesting reports, owing to their strictly scientific nature, detailed experimentation of zoo animals. For example, the taphonomic experiments conducted by Charles Lyell with porcupines, observing tooth-marked leaves of elephant bones, and the study of the iris mammal patterns for comparative anatomy. There were many more examples like this in the press, of course. News about sensory experiments exploring how animals reacted to stimuli, like music, alcohol, smoke, or perfume, became highly viral, if I may use the term. These accounts represented a peculiar mix between genuine scientific experimentation and media sensationalism. Reports concerning lifespan of exotic species in captivity attracted immense press interest too. They often feature unreliable data. For example, news about the tortoise drake mixed legendary show with the actual animal in the zoo, attributing to much greater age to it. News about medical procedures, illnesses, surgeries, drug administration, and care were also very frequent. This interest reflected in the general press, but also in specialized medical and veterinary journals. Similarly, news of the acclimatization of useful species and their hybridization with domestic animals also appeared in specialized agricultural and veterinary journals. News about insects was important because Spanish zoological collections did not have an entomology section. These reports arrived just as entomology was emerging in Spain. They showed that insects were interesting for science and changed the old view of insects as simple pests or negative symbols. Also, it was significant that several female entomologists were named. The same can be said for reptiles. This news aided the idea that they were not just symbolically negative animals or purely utilitarian because of their venom, helping the public to view them as objects of scientific interest in their own right. Regarding primatology, it was not normal to receive great primates in Spain until the mid-20th century, when they were first introduced and studied at the Barcelona Zoo. Therefore, these reports acquired special relevance as primary sources of this kind of knowledge. The behavior of apes during tea parties was described in meticulous detail. Articles highlighted the grooming, jealousy, shame, and use of cutely, forcing a human comparison. In early 20th century Spanish culture, where Darwin's ideas had not been widely disseminated, these accounts encouraged people to view great apes either as degenerate humans or as humans in the making, narrowing the distance between us. Some star animals from the London Zoo were featured in Spanish sources. Obaysch was one of the first to appear, and there was also Jenny, the pipe-smoking monkey with a pipped rooster, who featured in both the illustrated press and costumbrista literature. Later, Jumbo became famous during the Barnum Porches diplomatic scandal, and alongside many other names. However, the star animals per excellence in Spain were those in local zoos. In both cases, these animals were seen by the public as fellow citizens with their own names, biographies, and personalities, inspiring genuine public concern to their welfare. Interactive activities involving direct contact with these animals attracted considerable attention too. These experiences were presented as both educational and entertainment, especially for children. The press also paid special attention to new types of enclosures that aimed to improve animal welfare. These spaces were often regarded as an indicator of what a modern zoo should be. Technical innovations such as installing spotlights or ultraviolet lights for tropical animals attracted great attention. However, deeper comparisons focused on the management model, heavily sourced for annual reports or society annual reports. These models provided data on visitor numbers, profiles, and experienced keepers. Above all, many Spanish opinions saw this semi-private model as necessary to implement in Spain. The Spanish press also reported on the London Zoo as a source of inspiration for artists, of course. Curiously, one of the earliest films shown in Spain featured the animals of the London Zoo. Lasting only a few minutes, their films were part of traveling cinema programs for around 1905 and were exhibited for over a decade. As a final example of this transnational zoological culture, I wanted to include these comic strips showing humoristic scenes in European zoos. They were translated and appeared occasionally in Spanish newspapers. This humor could be understood in different countries because the comic situations between the public and the animals were universal. Before finishing, I would like to mention an exceptional scientist who played a key role in disseminating zoological culture in Spain, Ángel Cabrera, the last of the slide. As I noted at the beginning, the books of nature history of Spanish authors were one of the main channels for this knowledge. Many of these naturalists were associated with the Natural History Museum of Madrid, and those shown here were foreign members of Zoological Society in London. Among them, Cabrera stands out for his influential role in circulating this culture through the mass press. Funded by Spanish state scholarship, Cabrera spent a month in London. As a member of the society, he visited the zoo in his free time during the era of Mr. Pocock. Interestingly, what caused his attention most was the rare duckling and the impressive parrot collection. Cabrera used this first-hand experience to publish fascinating reports of animal behavior in the Spanish press, like these features on monkey intelligence or giraffe curiosities. A large part of these chronicles were based on his own precise observations, photographs, and drawings made during his visits. After moving to Buenos Aires, Cabrera wrote many articles about zoos for Caras y Caretas, the journal Caras y Caretas, including a special one about the London Zoo anniversary to show its scientific importance to American audience. Precisely, Caras y Caretas was the magazine that most widely disseminated the London Zoo news and zoological garden culture in Argentina. Finally, Ángel Cabrera proposed improvements to modernize the Casa de Fieras inspired by the London Zoo, arguing that Madrid needed a modern institution. However, these reforms were never fully implemented. Only a few tiny improvements were made due to a limited municipal budget and severe space constraints. Cabrera finally believed that zoos had done more for the zoological education of the public than any other institution. And in conclusion, I wanted to show how news from the London Zoo reached the Spanish public, making them part of a transnational zoological culture. Even as a peripheral receptor, the Spanish public participated in the same debates as the British. This was part of a global information network shared across the Western world. Through the mass press, a child in Madrid, Buenos Aires, or London shared the same knowledge. They all knew that a monkey smoked on a pipe or a boa swallowed another boa. In this sense, those were the true hubs for the globalization of popular zoological culture. And within this network, the London Zoo held a massive influence. As the final reflection, I want to highlight that this world has shifted since 1970. Natural documentaries and television became the main source of popular zoological knowledge. Today, almost everyone knows that elephants remember migration routes or that chimps use tools. This knowledge now comes mostly from outside the zoos. Modern zoos still generate important transnational news about science, conservation, and anecdotes, but they no longer dominate mass zoological culture. But we must acknowledge the legacy. Historic zoos are the physical repositories of our collective cultural memory. They were one of the first windows that connected the Western public to the wild or exotic animal world. Thank you very much.